Welcome if you're new here, and welcome back if you're returning. I'm Gina, and I'm here to talk about the full moon in Scorpio that occurs on April 23rd. This astrology report is for all signs, and I'll just go over the plan a little bit for what we're going to talk about today. We're really focused exclusively on this Scorpio new moon, which I'm just going to take a quick second to highlight here. Apologies for the way in which it takes a second, but I do think it sort of helps us to see it. So we're looking at the sun and the moon here across from each other in the chart. The sun has just moved into Taurus and the moon is, that's better. And the moon is in Scorpio. This chart is for just a few hours after the lunation is exact, so you'll see the moon has moved on just a few degrees from that point. Okay, and then we can make this big again. I think it does take a second, but it sort of helps to focus, I think, to be able to have that whole chart. So what we're doing today, it's really very, very focused on the Scorpio full moon. First, I want to talk about the eclipses that we've recently come out of in a few different ways, actually, and how that impacts this full moon. And I also want to talk about timing and when the full moon is active. Next, we'll talk about how Mercury retrograde, we're in a Mercury retrograde cycle right now, how that impacts the full moon, and how the recent, just yesterday, as I record this on the 21st, Jupiter Uranus conjunction is impacting this lunation. Next, we'll talk about how this lunation is making a square to Pluto and how that impacts the signature and this full moon. Finally, we'll talk about the ruling planet of Mars over here and how Mars is conjunct Neptune at this time and the way in which that impacts the full moon in Scorpio as well. I'll also save a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, so feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and at the end of the video, once I've gone through everything, I will go through those comments and answer any and all questions that anyone has. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for bearing with me. I know that the pace of these live videos is a little bit different. I edit the other videos on my channel, and it has a little bit of a different pace, but I really enjoy these opportunities to go live and talk in a more casual way with you, and also to answer your questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. First thing I want to talk about is the eclipses and how that's impacting things. Okay, there's a few different things here to mention. First of all, the last lunation that we had before this full moon was the new moon solar eclipse in Aries 2 weeks ago on April 8th that many of you are aware of. And 2 weeks before that, there was a full moon lunar eclipse in Libra. Eclipses always come in cycles. And so having another lunation after that, we're still under the influence of that solar eclipse period, that new moon period. New moons really open up energy for about a month, right? So when we had that new moon in Aries on the 8th, those energies are active until we have our next new moon 2 weeks from now. And so really for 6 months after that, and really for even longer, given that it's an eclipse. But, you know, I mean, that is the challenge of astrology. All of these things are happening at the same time. And holding the signature for all of it at once is how we get the best understanding of what all of this means. But, you know, that can be challenging to do. It can be challenging to structure into YouTube videos, because everything really, really goes together, but we have to kind of find ways to present them in a piece at a time anyway. So just to keep in mind, even though we are in this Scorpio full moon, that Aries solar eclipse energy is still active and still very potent. So we still have a lot going on in Aries. The nodes are here. Venus is here pulling a lot of energy. Mercury retrograde is happening. We'll get there in a second. But we still have that whole influence, and we have that fieriness from Aries happening too. That quickness, that energy, and that pressure of sort of getting started on this new project that you're excited about. And just whatever that Aries eclipse called up for you. All that's active now still as well. Okay, the next thing I want to mention is that this is the first lunation that we're having in Scorpio that isn't an eclipse in a while. So the last series of eclipses occurred in October of 23, and one of them was along this Scorpio-Taurus axis because we've been having eclipses here for a while, for 18 months, or maybe even that was the 2 years mark. We'd been having our eclipses along the Scorpio-Taurus axis until they shifted into Aries and Libra. So this is the first lunation that we've had in a while that isn't an eclipse along this axis. And we won't have eclipses along this axis again until 2031. So Scorpio is a very powerful, deep, emotional sign. When we have full moons in Scorpio, they're usually a pretty powerful full moon. But I would want to say, well, this one's not as powerful as the ones we've been having for the last few years. I would want to say that because that eclipse point has moved off, but I kind of can't because we're still in the open eclipse energies from the Aries solar eclipse. And there's so much else going on that we're going to continue to talk about, right? From the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, the Mercury retrograde. I think with everything else that's happening, the fact that this lunation is making a square to Pluto, I think with everything else that's happening, even though we are moving away from the eclipse points being on this axis, it's still a very powerful time. Another thing I want to mention is that this eclipse is active 2 days before and really especially potent even for 2 days after, because as we build to the full moon, we really are feeling it. So that's why I'm beginning this report for the 21st. So you start to feel that full moon energy begin to build. For a lot of people, that can look like a little bit of difficulty sleeping, a little extra energy, and basically all of the signatures and the different ideas that we're talking about here beginning to show up. So whatever, the signature is, which will continue to unfold as we go. There can be a restlessness. There can be a desire to get out and socialize, to be with others, to move things forward. There's a lot of energy around a full moon. Although this one is so watery, so deep. There's a slowness to it actually as well, and just sort of a depth. But anyway, beginning on the 21st, we start to feel that sort of tea kettle boil, if you will. And then it's exact on the 23rd. But the moon remains in Scorpio for 2 days after. So really until the 25th, it's like we're still experiencing this full moon. So I just wanted to mention that about timing. Okay, I think that we're ready to move on to talk about a couple other aspects in the chart and how they're impacting things. One thing I want to talk about that's very, very important is this Mercury retrograde. So allow me just to highlight that because I think it's a little helpful to help us all remember sort of what we're talking about and just kind of process the chart as well. Oops, my apologies. This is taking a long time. I'm sorry. It's not good. Not what you're supposed to do when making a video. Okay, here's our Mercury retrograde in Aries. Okay, that's why the numbers are red, because Mercury is retrograde at this time. And you can see it's conjunct that north node as well. Maybe I can sort of move this so that you can see the north node there too, which is very powerful signature. And just came out of that conjunction with Chiron. There's a lot going on. But really what we're highlighting is the fact that this current lunation, let me make this big again. Really what I want to talk about with this is that this lunation is occurring at the same time as a Mercury retrograde. So that adds to the signatures coming in from both sides. It makes me think about, even more so than usual with a Mercury retrograde or a Scorpio full moon, there's something we're meant to uncover. There's something we're meant to learn, to see, to look at, to understand. What are we mentally processing at this time? What are you learning? What are you working on? That could be internally, it could be externally, right? But that Mercury retrograde is digging down somewhere in terms of helping us to understand or learn or process or work on something. And a Scorpio full moon loves to go deep, loves to really get at things that that are the most intimate, the most intense, the deepest connections. So these signatures working together is very, very interesting. Okay. And I want to add another note to it. And if you follow astrology and you know astrology, which I think we have varying degrees of work with that on this channel, which I love, but I bet almost all of you, if you've watched any astrology lately, have heard about, oh, I don't like that. I want it to be glowy. Have heard about the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. That was exact on the 20th, but it's really still exact now. Look, they're still at 22 degrees, and this chart is for the 24th, for right after that that full moon. So, yes, the Jupiter Uranus conjunction is probably the most powerful conjunction of this entire year of 2024. It is exact at the time of this lunation. I'm going to say it's exact. It is. I mean, these planets are at exactly the same point. It was just a few days before that they came into exact alignment. So this is adding to our signature in terms of something that is expanding. Something maybe that comes in that's a little bit surprising or shocking or sudden, that expands us. It's an opportunity for growth, a positive opportunity for growth, right? So we have all this power and intensity of a Scorpio full moon. We have a Mercury retrograde asking us to look at something, learn something, process something that's going on deep down within us. And I say that because of the way it interacts with the Scorpio full moon. Also, we just have the intensity of coming off of this Aries solar eclipse and the corresponding Libra lunar eclipse 2 weeks before. So many different things all together. But this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction being a part of it, wow, no wonder we're so busy. No wonder we're so busy. No wonder there's so much to process. No wonder we have so much going on for us mentally. No wonder we're having to go deep and uncover some things we hadn't thought about for a long time, because this new expansive opportunity is a part of this signature too. And whenever we grow and expand, we're challenged as well, right? This all kind of goes together in a way that makes a lot of sense to me. So pay attention around this period, particularly between the 21st and the 25th, to expansive opportunities that are on your mind, because it really isn't all going to occur right now, right? I mean, this is a conjunction that is exact for quite a long time. It's active for weeks and weeks and weeks. And really, everything with the eclipses is active all year. We haven't even talked about Pluto yet. I'm about to get there. But there's so much right now that it doesn't have to occur exactly right now. It's more the kind of thing where, like, 10 years from now, when you look back, you'll say, oh, yeah, that was like spring of 2024, or that was early 2024, mid 2024, or even just 2024. I really do. There are different periods in astrology where there's more excitement than others. There's always stuff happening, and there's always rare stuff happening because it's just this amazing mechanism, and it's always moving and turning, and just like our lives, right? Nothing in the world, nothing stays the same. Everything's always moving and growing and changing. But also, just like our lives, some periods are more active, more exciting, more potent than others. And this period is a really, really exciting one. Um, I would say 2020, mid 2020 was sort of the last period that felt like there was this much active, like in an acute way to me. And I just mean that just in terms of it being a big shift, like a time where a lot is really changing. And I think so much has been changing for all of us personally and for the collective for so long. We've just gotten used to that, right? We've gotten used to this big era shift. Um, our lives are changing, our work is changing, the way people relate to each other is shifting. That's really something to pay attention to with all of these different signatures is relationships, because Aries Libra is all about relationships. And your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others, right? Aries is all about the self. Libra is about the other, simply put. And so themes about that are coming up right now. We're releasing old ways of doing things with others that didn't work, and we're bringing in new ways of doing things for ourselves that do. And that is empowering, that is pinging back and forth across those parts of the chart, right? When we learn something new about ourselves and improve the way we interact with ourselves, relate to ourselves, our relationships improve. When our relationships improve, it heals us, it heals our relationship to ourselves. And there's a lot of that going on right now, too. And with a full moon in Scorpio that loves that intimacy, that loves the deeper connection, the better, that could be coming in a little extra strong right now. Okay, let me just check my notes here and see if there's anything else I wanted to say about the Jupiter Uranus conjunction or the Mercury retrograde, and take a sip of my coffee. Okay. Yes, there is one more thing. The one more thing is that Mercury is stationing direct on the 25th. So right around that time is one of the most powerful times for the Mercury retrograde cycle. People think about Mercury retrograde as the 3 weeks, usually about, that Mercury is retrograde. I agree with that, but I think more and more lately, we're all sort of calling our attention to the fact that Mercury retrogrades tend to be the most profound right around the stations, even before the stations and just after the stations. It's as Mercury is shifting. So, that's when like the confusion can start, or when the confusion can be cleared up, or when like the new message can start to be processed and then finally be processed. It's sort of working underground during the middle of the Mercury retrograde, but it gets started and ends at the beginning and the end. And so that's why we feel it around then, because it's really shifting and changing. So just know, in terms of the Mercury retrograde, if there were any big themes that came up for you around the 1st of April, they could surface again, because that was when this Mercury retrograde started, the 1st of April. So really like the 1st through the 3rd or 4th would be important to think about in that sense. Those themes could come up again. I've also just been noticing a lot with the Mercury retrograde in Aries, especially at the beginning, the communication challenges. People having a hard time even just sort of like getting the words out, stumbling over the words. This isn't major, and Mercury retrograde stuff for the most part isn't major. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to know about 10 or 12 years from now, the way that Jupiter and Uranus, you might. Mercury retrograde, you're it's minor stuff. But in the moment, in the day to day, it does feel more potent. If your computer breaks down, if you have to go get a new phone, if you have a miscommunication, you have to redo something at work, all of that, really matters in the day to day, in the moment to moment. So be on the lookout for anything like that around this time. With it being in Aries, I feel like we can be too quick. So just also remember to slow down. This is something I say probably more often than I should, just because I don't want to be too repetitive, and maybe I'm giving myself the message. But when things are going fast, it's a good time to slow down. And things are still moving very fast through the end of April, with Mercury retrograde wrapping up, with all of these planets still in Aries, with coming out of the signature of the solar eclipse. So we still have all that fiery, fast, start, spring, boom, boom kind of energy. And it's a wonderful time to slow down a little bit so that you can kind of keep up. And, I am doing a lot during this time as well, just with working on trying to keep my nervous system regulated. I think that with all of these different energies, I won't review them again for you now and be too repetitive, but it's a lot. And, it's good to sort of go out into the world and do something and move things forward. And just when you start to feel yourself kind of getting a little off, look out the window for a few minutes. Take a deep breath. Relax your shoulders. Put a smile on your face. Think of a couple different things that you're grateful for. I just try, once I start to feel my nervous system go in a direction that isn't productive, go more into like a overthinking or a fear or survival mode, for a better way of saying it. When I just start to go there, once I notice it, you gotta notice it. That's part of the trick. I start to try to do just little things to call it back gently. And then you move forward again. And then you start to feel it and you call it back and you work with yourself. So that's a recommendation for this time as well. Okay, now let's move on and talk about how this lunation is also making a square to Pluto. Of course, because there isn't enough going on with it already. All right, let me draw this for us. Need my glowy line. Okay, so here we're talking about how the sun and the moon are making a square aspect to Pluto. That's not exactly the best way to draw it, but hopefully you guys are seeing what I mean, right? We have our sun and our moon across from each other in Taurus and Scorpio, the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, Mercury retrograde in Aries, and now we can see that actually, yeah, of course. Why am I questioning myself? I was questioning myself for a second there that maybe they weren't, but I think it's just the fact that I'm looking at this sun and the moon not over here. But yes, so when Pluto is 3 signs away, or when a planet is 3 signs away from another planet, they're making a square to each other because of the 12 signs, right? When we square that, we go 3 and 3. So 1, 2, 3, Pluto, 1, 2, 3, right? The sun is at 4 degrees. The moon, a couple hours before, was also at 4 degrees. And here is Pluto at 2 degrees. So Pluto is within a few degrees of orb, squaring that sun and moon, squaring this Scorpio full moon. And that's very significant. It adds to the powerful, heavy aspect of this signature with Scorpio. It makes me think even more about what is coming to the surface that is hidden, buried, something you haven't thought about for a while. This could be something happening internally or something happening externally, right? It could just be you having a realization on the inside, thinking about things you haven't for a while, or information actually coming to you externally for you to process. It's all about uncovering, though, any way you look at it. It's a really good time to listen. This is a listening full moon. This Pluto signature with Scorpio too just adds to the passionate nature of this eclipse, the depth of it, the sort of soulful emotions that are coming to the surface. We might be processing things from the past that were difficult, some struggles from the past, maybe misunderstandings from the past with that Mercury retrograde. Those things might be coming to the surface to be cleared a little bit. One thing I want to mention is that, Scorpio full moon is such a great time for all of this because Scorpio wants to transform more than anything. They don't want change. Gemini wants change for the sake of change. Scorpio is down for transformation. Scorpio is down to grow and learn. And Scorpio is willing to suffer if need be in order to transform. And there's an aspect to this full moon that has that signature to it. We're ready to go deep if we need to clear something that needs to be cleared. And that's a beautiful thing. This doesn't have to be super difficult. Just because something's sort of deep or mysterious, just because it's processing old pain doesn't even mean it has to be difficult. I guess I'm reminded again of another practice that I try to use in case it's helpful for anybody, and that obviously many others try to use as well, which is just not resisting it. So if something feels a little painful, if you're working with some memory from the past, if we start to think, oh, I hate thinking about this, I don't want to think about this, why am I still thinking about this, right? That's really adding to the difficulty. Whereas if we allow and just are compassionate, as if a young child came to you and said, hey, I'm having a problem, right? We'd say, oh, what's going on, honey? What is it that you're working on? How can I help you? And that's a wonderful way to sort of nurture our own emotions. And it does make the experience of walking through processing difficulty a lot easier when we're able to find those moments. And, I'm not able to do it all the time at all. I'm able to do it a small amount of the time, but I think that the more that we're able to do that, the better probably. And, again, it's all about remembering that we're caught up in it so that we can apply these practices. Anyway, back to the astrology. Talking about Pluto squaring this lunation and how it can help us to process difficulties, misunderstandings, painful struggles from the past, and how Scorpio is willing to suffer for transformation, not for change, for transformation. Again, I just want to come back to some of the things we were talking about with the Mercury retrograde, with all these signatures all together, there being something that we're meant to see, something that we're meant to learn or know around this time. The sun is always shining sort of a spotlight on something. And Scorpio is so deep, and Pluto is so deep, and it's also transformative. And we have all that fire and excitement of Aries and the good newness of the Jupiter Uranus conjunction. So it just feels like there's an awful lot going on, and it's a good time to slow down and listen and process. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about that is significant for this lunation before we do the question and answer at the end. And that's the fact that this lunation, am I really going to add to this again? I think I am. I'm sorry, guys. If you're still sticking with me and you're bearing with all of these different, I have to shrink the Mercury to even make this work, and you're bearing with all of these markings, I really applaud you. Thank you very much for being here. And, I'm still pretty new to this, so I'm getting better at it. I'm learning my programs, and I'm learning YouTube and how to do this in a way that really works. Okay. So the ruler of this lunation is Mars, because we are talking about a full moon in Scorpio. It is ruled by Mars. Mars right now is in Pisces, and is conjunct Neptune in Pisces. So that is another part of this full moon that we need to talk about if we're talking about the full moon, which we are. um, okay, Mars conjunct Neptune is a really watery signature. It is kind of like we're just like swimming with this full moon, where I feel like you're like swimming in the ocean or in a pool and looking at the full moon from underwater, like in the depth of night. You know, it is the wateriest full moon because Mars in Pisces, Mars is this warrior, right? He's active, he's going, he's moving, he's fighting. But in Pisces, he's come all the way around the zodiac and is finally taking a rest. And he sort of like removed his armor and is in the sauna, right? And he's reflecting on the battle and thinking about what he's learned from it and what he can do better next time. And he's using his intuition to heal and think about what's bruised, what he needs to do to take care of himself, what he needs to do to take care of others. It's a very reflective, intuitive, watery placement for Mars. For the ruling planet of this eclipse to be sort of in that space is really interesting, right? And then not only is it in Pisces, but it's conjunct Neptune, which is the wateriest planet we have, right? Neptune, Poseidon. Mars Neptune aspects sometimes get a bad rap. I don't like that. Sometimes people can say that it's like a lot of confusion, but I mean, it's a fine line between confusion and dreaminess, right? Just because things are a little vague or things are a little creative doesn't mean necessarily that they're confusing. Full disclosure, I do have Mars in Pisces natally myself. So I'm sort of used to this placement. But yeah, I think it's something you can relax into, and it doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's not necessarily confusing. It's intuitive. And I mean, it's really extra, extra, extra when we're talking about what's happening with Scorpio and the fact that it's Neptune. It's not just Mars and Pisces. It's so much happening with this. So it can feel sensitive. I want to bring the word sensitive into this reading when we talk about Mars and Pisces conjunct Neptune. Emotionally, this time is a lot, and there can be moments where it feels really overwhelming. There's also a tendency that I want to mention, and this has to do with the Pluto as well, and just sort of putting it all together, especially what I'm thinking now with the Mars and Pisces conjunct Neptune. It can be, sometimes you can overthink to the point of like obsession with signatures like this. And, you know, with the North Node and Aries and everything kicking off too, it can be like too much. It can be a little bit sort of controlling, you know, because it can be emotionally overwhelming. Sometimes when we're in that fear space, we want to go into controlling, right? And also just Pisces signatures can be sort of obsessive. So be aware of that and try to sort of put that down, you know, loosen the grip a little bit. And just be aware that these energies are going on out in the world as well. It can be an emotional few days. It can be a heavy few days. It's a time when people are learning and processing things. It's a great time to be quiet and listen and go slow with the energies. I also just want to say that, you know, when we talk about the astrology, it all sounds so dramatic, and I never really want it to sound that way. It's subtle. If astrology was super dramatic and clear and obvious and, you know, surface, everyone would believe in it. We would all know everything about astrology. It's not. It's sort of a subtler thing. And more than anything else, astrology is just a wonderful tool that we can use to help us think about our time, think about ourselves, and be a little bit self-reflective, a little bit intuitive. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. You know, we're talking about such a powerful full moon here, and I never ever want to add to fear. You know, I actually think it's super wonderful. This is the most powerful aspect of the whole thing. Oh, I forgot to make it big again. Sorry, guys. Oh, that's better. This is the most powerful aspect of the whole thing, that Jupiter Uranus conjunction. And it's incredibly positive. And positive, everything's positive. It's just sometimes as we progress, as we move forward, as we work to evolve and grow, sometimes that experience is easier than others. And there is a certain depth or a heaviness to some of the astrology around the Scorpio full moon. Some people enjoy that more than others. um, and I think it's a wonderful time to process still everything that's been going on in April. Through this last week, while we still have Mercury retrograde, right, until the 25th of April, it's still a great time to think about everything that's shifting for us and changing for us and what we want to bring in new. You know, this Jupiter Uranus conjunction, it's like aim high. What's your highest wish or dream? And what have you learned in the past? What are you ready to let go of? How have you grown? What new information do you have that can serve you so that you can move into this next phase a little lighter as we put some of this down and we move into May? All this intense astrology in April and really in March as well sort of does let up a bit in May. Okay, let me see if that's everything that I have here. I think it is. All right, I'll just take a look real quick at the comments. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you very much for your compliments. Oh, it's interesting. Someone mentioned 29 degrees of Scorpio for Venus. And so this lunation actually is occurring at the earlier signs of Scorpio, not the later signs. It's a very interesting signature, though, in terms of what was I thinking? If you have Venus at 29 of Scorpio, well, it was sextile to Pluto, which has now moved off. And that is probably a nice thing. And you also just had those eclipses going through your chart for the last year and a half or so. So when I think about the 29 degrees of Scorpio Venus placement, the last year and a half, you may be coming out of a period where there has been a lot of shifting in your relationships and in also what you see as beautiful, what you desire, what you, your aesthetic, like even sometimes our appearance can shift a little bit when Venus is impacted. Your values around relationships may have undergone some real changes the last year and a half or 2 years, but I think you're coming out of that period now. And obviously you have many other things going on in your chart, but as far as your relationships are concerned and sort of your aesthetic sense, perhaps something with finances as well, there may have been a lot of shakeup in the last year and a half or so. And you've actually come into more stability probably in the last 6 months and going forward. But you probably don't mind going very deep in relationships with that placement. But just remember to share as well as listen. You're probably really good at learning about other people. But remember to have that intimacy go both ways and share about yourself. Sometimes Scorpio is wonderful at listening and taking everything in about somebody else, and it's harder to open up yourself and have that vulnerability on your own end. But that is the thing that will bring relationships to that real depth of intimacy that with a Venus and Scorpio placement, I bet you really crave. So I hope that was helpful to read on that signature for a second. And thank you all for being here. Please, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like. It helps the channel so much and it helps to circulate the video. And I just hope you all have a wonderful full moon in Scorpio. I'll see you again soon.